Ruth will go first. Let's just go down the line. Does that sound good? Okay.
Okay. You heard a lot of the history of my coming. I arrived in San Francisco in about this time of year in 1971 for the express purpose of coming out. I had fallen in love with someone here. I actually came out on Henry Street, which is in the Castro, and lived in the neighborhood kind of before it had become such a gay neighborhood. It was in '71. There were a few gay things happening there, but it wasn't. You wouldn't have called it a gay neighborhood. And I sort of watched as it became that. And I remember Harvey Milk was, before he may have been running for office, but he was not about to be elected yet. And he started a campaign where he passed out buttons that said "Buy Gay" on them. And I remember that me and my friends were sort of not very happy with that. That we thought, "Buy gay." Now wait a minute. And we went marching into Harvey's camera shop and said, Harvey, gay capitalism isn't any better than straight capitalism. So, why should we do this? And he said, because we want a neighborhood. We want a place. And, in thinking it many years later, watching how it evolved, I feel like he was right about that. I'm also feeling these days like I'm right also. That even though the people who have bought our building, I believe, are gay, although I don't know them at all, they still are putting out, 8 people. All of us qualified for either the age, I don't know if you know, the Ellis Act gives the renters certain kinds of rights in using the Ellis Act, and you get paid some amount of money. It's not near enough for first and last month's rent anymore, but you do get some money. You also get 4 months' notice, and if you are over the age of 62 or disabled, you get a full year's notice. And all 8 units qualified for a year's notice. So this is a building that people have lived in. I've only lived in it for 8 years, but the other tenants have lived in it for 20, 35, a long time, years. And so anyway, the evictions. What I've been finding is that there are a lot of evictions going on right now, and that the Castro is it's not the only place in the city where this is happening by any means, but it is definitely happening in the Castro. I'm certainly not the only eviction going on, I've discovered. They are following the absolute letter of the law, and so what we understand from talking to housing people is that that they're doing it right, and so we will have to move. What this means for us is finding another place, especially for the people who have lived in a rent-controlled apartment all this time. There's no way they're going to be able to live in the Castro. For me, it means that I will never probably be able to live alone again. It's a little, it's a tiny, but 1 bedroom. All of these are 3-room apartments, and kitchen, living room, bedroom apartments. And so that we'll never be able to find a place in the heart of the Castro, or even in a fairly decent neighborhood. One of the things that's come up in the discussions with my neighbors, because we've all been meeting with each other a lot, is that one of the things that we're really worried about is finding another home that feels safe, and that there is a kind of safety in the Castro. And I know there's always been problems with that, but I remember when the Castro was a target, and sometimes still is, for people from out of town to go beat up a queer, and they knew they could find them in the Castro. So in that way, it wasn't safe, and still isn't in some ways. But I feel like for women and elderly people, it's a lot safer than a lot of other parts of the city. And that's mostly who's in the building. There's one gay man, 4 lesbians, a mother and her son who are immigrants, and they are the ones that have lived there for 35 years. You know, it's mostly, it's not entirely gay building, but mostly. It's located at 17th and Noe, so it's really at the heart, in the heart of things. I also, I want to give a little bit of other kind of history to this issue also. In the late 70s, I was part of a group called Lesbians Against Police Violence, LAPV. And that group was responding to the police having beaten up some lesbians as they came out of one of the lesbian bars. And there are many long stories about other incidents of the police beating up lesbians in those days, but it happened a number of times. They would raid a bar, or they would beat up people who were just a little drunk leaving the bars at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the group had organized around that, and we discovered that one of the women in the group was a secretary in one of the real estate offices in San Francisco, and she found a memo that talked about the use of gay people, particularly women, but also particularly lesbians, in gentrifying a neighborhood. And the strategy went something like this. And what happened is the LAPV group ended up doing a sort of street theater skit about this story. But the story, the rationale among the real estate folks in the 70s went something like this. You have a neighborhood made up of either Latino people or black people. The first thing as a landlord you should do is move in some white lesbians because they're tough on the street. They'll get a lot of flack because the neighbors will respond to having their neighborhood start to be changed, and they won't like it, and they'll take it out on them. But they're pretty tough on the street, and they can handle themselves, and so they'll deal. And then after a while, after they've sort of made a space for themselves, gotten the neighbors, you know, they're also really nice to the neighbors, so the neighbors will accept them eventually. Then you move in some gay men, and they'll fix up your property and make it all really nice. And then you move them out, of course, and you can either sell it for a lot of money, or you can move in somebody else who's wealthy. What was happening is that the rumor got spread a lot that the neighborhoods were changing because gay men were buying up the property. And when we really started doing the research, that was not the case. The people who owned the property were often people who didn't live in San Francisco at all and were not gay men. But the people in the, you know, the word in the neighborhood was that that was true, and it was creating friction on the street that was creating violence, and you know, gay men on the street ended up getting the brunt of it a lot. So did the dykes, but I think gay men even more, because they were being blamed for sort of gentrifying the neighborhood a lot.